Hi everybody, my name's Alison Wakelin and I'm here to introduce Project 45. So, what is Project 45? It's so named in response to Project 25, which is a plan that emerged from out of the Heritage Foundation, which is a right-wing think tank, and has become the sort of guidelines for the Republican takeover of the government after this election in 2024. So the plan is clearly published. You can easily find it and read it. And I'm not going to really talk about that very much right now. But I want to suggest that there's really not much in terms of fundamental issues that could be resolved in a year. It's almost impossible to imagine how the whole health service could be changed in 1 year. It's impossible to imagine how really many, fundamental problems like infrastructure, insurance, all sorts of things that would take way more than a year to resolve. And also, most of us don't feel like we have any say in the government anymore or in what the government does. So it's sort of hard for us to feel like we are participating. But if you look at the Constitution, it's pretty clear that the government is we the people. So instead of just turning up to vote once every 4 years and, maybe attending a few protests in between, we have to look at a way to really fundamentally change this and incorporate the intelligence and the power of the people into the way that we are governed. So to do this is a radical change, right? But it's not something new. It's not a governmental takeover. It's coming back to what is government in this country, which is we the people. So it's going to take a long time. But we could start right away. And we should start right away because we don't want to continue this situation where the government is very much influenced by the ultra wealthy and by corporate values and so on. So we have to think about what we could do. So the first thing we have to do is to decide what sort of nation we want to live in. Do we want to live in a nation that is very authoritarian, that is centrally governed? Do we want to live in a nation where there are some ultra wealthy people, but there's a huge amount of people living in poverty? Is that what we want? Probably not, because that is not very American. So instead of, the reason we have problems really is because we are discussing things on the level of programs, right? We're discussing things on the level of laws. A law can't really change enough. We need to get down to discuss on the level of values. So instead of just focusing on what we want, what laws we want the government to pass and so on, we need to take time as a nation to really think through what are our values, what are our fundamental values. And then once we have got that, this would be a sort of a parallel to the Constitution. It's not changing the Constitution. There are very few people who really think that there's something very wrong with the Constitution. There are certainly things that should be revisited every now and again. For instance, the Constitution was written by the Founding Fathers, and now we have founding mothers who need to have a voice. Women have now become equal, at least in theory, to men. So we need to see maybe some change to the Constitution which reflects the equality of women. But you can't change the Constitution just like that. a constitutional change would take a couple of decades probably if it was to be in a good direction. So before we get anywhere near there, we should come up with what I refer to as a statement of values. How do we want to see this country? What sort of things do we want to see in economics? How do we want our justice system to be? Right? So there are many, many things that we can talk about, but we need to talk. And so that means to get people meeting in coffee shops, having faith institutions involved in meetings and discussions. There are many, many things that we can do and we have to do. Because if we don't, then we deserve to be taken over. So a big part of what we need to do in the next few years is just, first of all, clarify our values, right? Clarify how we would like to see the distribution of income in this country, for instance. Well, let's say the distribution of wealth, which is different. Do we, for instance, think some people should have more than others? Do we think everybody should have exactly the same amount? Is there room for both of those? Can we come up with a plan that incorporates both of those perspectives to some degree? For instance, I doubt if anybody really thinks it would be ideal that there should be people who have absolutely nothing. So a statement of values would be different, for instance, than saying, well, if you don't work, you should have nothing. That would be a program. But that's something that we can decide after we know what we're aiming for. Okay? So the statement of values would be, well, I think everybody should have enough to live on, but I'm fine with some people having more. However, I don't think there should be people who have $100 billion. That sort of thing, right? And I think that we would find there's a huge amount of agreement. In fact, there's a YouTube called, I think it's Wealth Inequality in America, which comes up with a distribution and says about 92% of the people think that would be somewhat ideal. Both Democrats and Republicans. So I think that we would find a huge amount of agreement. We really need to look at our justice system. We have this huge problem of mass incarceration, and it's not going anywhere. It's not going away. So we need to really discuss what we would like to see as a justice system. So once we have figured out what we would like, what sort of nation we'd like to live in, then that's the time when we have to figure out how to establish a government, not just influence the government that exists, but establish a government that is going to be able to implement programs and policies that move us towards what we see as our ideal vision. Okay, and there are many people thinking how to do this, how we can actually, establish maybe institutions, all sorts of things to be able to influence our government. Of course, we're still going to be able to vote. And so, if we have enough people who agree on a vision, then I don't think the way to go is to establish another party or to try to take over either the Democratic or Republican Party. But we can work it out. So this is Project 45, and I will be talking more about some of the ideas and some of our actions that need to follow this. Okay, thank you for listening.